Welcome back to day 2 of the Augusta video sew along. In our previous video, we talked about the Augusta, gave you tips for choosing your fabric, and also went through the list of supplies you'll need to create your own. Today we'll be discussing how to choose a size, as well as running through some basic common pattern adjustments for the Augusta shirt and dress. While our next video will cover more advanced pattern techniques, there's unfortunately no way that I can possibly get every adjustment into these videos, so I'm sorry if there's a specific adjustment that you wanted that we did not get to. With that, let's dive into today's lesson. One of the most important things you can do to start any garment off on the right foot is to take accurate measurements and properly choose a size. If the pattern you start with is too small or too large, no matter what you do adjustment-wise, your garment is always going to be a little bit off. The 3 basic body measurements needed to select your size are bust, waist, and hip. Since the Augusta has a cocoon shape, the most important measurement is going to be the bust, followed by the hip. Generally, I like to have someone else take my measurements so I'm not twisting and bending while I take them, but it's not a big deal if you can't find another sewer to do so. Let's start with the bust measurement. The bust measurement refers to the full bust. For this measurement, you're going to measure around the fullest point of your bust, wearing whatever type of bra or undergarment you plan on wearing under your finished garment. Make sure the measuring tape is parallel to the floor. Bring it around your back, and make sure the tape measure is taut but not tight. You want to still be able to breathe when you're wearing your final garment. Note that measurement and write it down. The waist measurement will be at your natural waist. On many people, this is the smallest point of your torso, but that really depends on your body shape. If you fall into my category of being a square, a good rule of thumb is that your waist is generally where you bend from. So you take your tape measure, again, bring it around parallel to the floor, taut but not tight, and then note your measurement. The hip measurement will be at the fullest part of your hips and butt. Typically, this is approximately 7 inches below your natural waist, though it can be higher or lower. You'll want to make sure you get around the full circumference no matter where it falls, so you don't end up with a garment that's tight in the hips. So to take that measurement, again as the others, bring your tape measure around the fullest point, taut but not tight. I like to stand with my feet hip width apart, and then note that measurement. I record all my measurements and notes for each project on one of our free downloadable pattern cards. That way I have all of the information I used for each project neatly hanging with the pattern for the next time I want to make it. I'll link to the pattern cards in the description below the video. Once you get your measurements, it's time to select your size on the size chart. If your measurement falls between 2 sizes, for instance, if your bust is 35.5, you want to round up and choose the next size up. If you fall into different sizes for each measurement, as I do, you can either go with a straight size of the largest measurement or blend between sizes to get a better fit. There are a few things to think about in this situation. As I mentioned previously, the waist is the least important measurement, so if that's the largest garment size you fall into, I'd recommend checking the finished measurements for that size. If your waist is inside that, then go with the larger size of your hip or bust. If you're more than a size apart in the more important measurements of the bust and the hip, you'll likely want to blend to avoid having one section of the shirt loose or tight. That situation is usually never great for comfort or for the look of the garment. The measurements shown here are my personal measurements, so what I would do is blend from an 8 at the bust to a 10 at the hips and just completely omit my waist measurement. If you're a straight size and don't need to do any pattern adjustments, you're good to cut your pattern pieces. But if you fall in between sizes as I do, or need to make a pattern adjustment, we'll discuss that now. Making adjustments to your pattern is a great way to really customize your fit, and it does not need to be difficult or overwhelming. I've included this in previous videos, but I think it's super important. So before we get started, here are 5 tips that I have found helpful for students over the past 10 years of teaching. Tip 1. Start with a muslin. I always recommend making a muslin or a test garment before making any pattern alterations. This way you aren't guessing at what you'll need to adjust, but can pinpoint exactly what is working and what might need to be done. Tip number 2, only make one pattern adjustment at a time. We get questions all the time that go like this. I can't get the fit down on a pattern. I've done X, Y, and Z adjustments. Which one is causing this new problem? Unfortunately, I have no way of knowing, and there's no way to isolate the issue because 3 adjustments were done at once. So, if you're looking to do multiple pattern adjustments, start with one, then add only after you get the previous adjustment looking great. Tip number 3. Once you get your initial adjustment looking good and you're ready to move on to the next one, if you're doing more than one, trace off a new pattern piece and make the adjustment to the new piece. That way, if it turns out you didn't need the adjustment after all, or if it isn't working for some reason, you can easily step back to the previous iteration of the pattern. Tip number 4. A general order of adjustments that I recommend is, first, start with any blending between sizes you might need to do. Then do any length adjustments. Bust adjustments come next. And after that, anything else you feel that you might need. And the 5th and final tip, don't forget that you can always measure any point on your body and compare that to the pattern. Not sure if the shoulders are going to be too wide or too narrow? Measure your shoulder and then measure the pattern. In the same way that we use body measurements to draft the pattern, you can use your own measurements to check the fit before you even start. Now, let's get into those specific pattern adjustments. The first pattern adjustment we're going to cover is blending between sizes. In this example, we'll be blending from a size 8 bust to a size 10 hip. You'll want to blend between the bust and the hip around the waist area rather than from the bust to the hip because you don't want to affect the measurements at those 2 points, just the area in between them. I like to highlight where I'm starting from, so 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. And then I'm going to be doing a 10 at the hip. Now on the Augusta, we have a French dart, which means it's angled to hit further down the side seam than a typical dart. So, I like to draw over from center front to the bust point. So this is approximately where the bust hits the side seam. So you can see the dart falls below that. So what we're going to want to do is fold the dart so that we can blend between the two. So I like to score my dart so that it folds easier. And then place a weight so that it stays put. So now you can see you'll have a much easier time blending between the two sizes. So this will be my new side seam. Now to make sure that this new side seam transfers over to the dart take-up, and the dart take-up is the fabric inside of the dart, you can do one of two things. You can either cut along this line now with the paper folded, or take a needlepoint tracer and trace along the side seam. Then unfold your dart, and I'll trace over the holes so you can see them. And that will be your new side seam. You can see it's very slightly different from the original here. So here we go from an 8 over to a 10. So you'll then need to do that to the other side of the front because the Augusta is not symmetrical due to the way the collar is constructed. After you make this adjustment to the front, you'll need to do the same thing to the back, otherwise they won't sew together properly. So here we have the back. Size 8. Size 10. Use your curved ruler again. And simply draw a new line, and this will be your new side seam. One thing you want to keep in mind with blending is that for pieces that only attach to the garment above or below the blending point, you'll use the size they're attaching to. So in this case, we'd cut a size 8 yoke, collar, lapel, and sleeves. Next up, we'll discuss lengthening and shortening your pattern pieces. This alteration is pretty straightforward. There are 3 main places to lengthen or shorten this pattern: at the waist, the hip for the dress, or lengthening through the hem. To lengthen through the bodice, start by locating the pattern pieces you need to adjust. So you'll need to do the front and the back. I'll be showing you on the back because it's a little more manageable size-wise. To lengthen, start by cutting along the lengthen shorten line or between them. I then place a piece of paper underneath. Tape the top in place so it doesn't move. And then extend the center back line. Now you'll decide how much you're going to lengthen it. So let's just say we're going to do an inch. After you've drawn your line, simply align the bottom piece. And you can tape along this point as well. You'll then need to blend the side seam. So again, take your curved ruler. And draw your new line. Now to shorten the pattern, we'll do exactly the opposite. So say we want to shorten it through the waist an inch. You'd still start by cutting and then draw a line an inch above the lengthen shorten line. Align the bottom, tape across, and then you'll blend your new side seam. Now if you'd like to just add length to the hem, you can see here I've highlighted our size 10. If we're going to add an inch, all you do is just align your ruler. Trace across. Then you're going to lengthen this side by an inch and then reconnect this angled corner here. If you want to lengthen or shorten the sleeve, there are a few ways you can go about it. If you're simply adjusting the length by an inch or less, I recommend working through the center of the sleeve. This way you don't affect the lower edge because in this case we have a cuff that we need to attach. So these lines aren't parallel to the grain line. So if you extend them, the lower edge of the sleeve is going to become wider than the top edge of the cuff. So I would put my lengthen shorten line just right through the middle. and then lengthen or shorten through here. Keep in mind that this cuff is going to make it very hard to shorten this sleeve. So if you have the short sleeve, you'll either need to adjust the cuff, remove the cuff, or just, this is about as short as you can go. You can make it longer though. For the long sleeve, we have a lengthen shorten line right through the middle, so you can use this. This is about elbow length. If you're just shortening the long sleeve by a small amount, you can definitely use the lengthen or shorten line. But say you want to take the sleeve up significantly, you want to go from wrist length to 3/4 length. You're going to want to take that off of the bottom. So say we're shortening it by 5 inches. You would just work across. And what this does is make sure the circumference still will go around the wider part of your arm. If you just shorten it, this is great for wrist length or wrist width, but maybe not for higher up your arm. Now let's talk about bust adjustments. If you've ever researched bust adjustments, you know there are a few different ways to achieve them. I'm going to show you the method that we use in the studio. The Augusta comes in both our 0 to 18 B cup range and our 14 to 30 D cup range. Keep in mind, these are sewing cup sizes, not bra cup sizes. Sewing cup size is determined by subtracting your upper bust measurement from your lower bust measurement, while bra size also takes into account the under bust. This means your sewing cup and bra cup sizes can differ and often do. The first thing you need to do before you start any bust adjustment is to figure out what sort of an adjustment you'll need, if any. To do this, we're going to need our full bust measurement, which we took earlier in this video, as well as our upper bust measurement. To take your upper bust measurement, place the tape measure around your body just under the armpits. It will lay over your bust and go around your shoulder blades at the back. The tape measure may angle upwards slightly at the bust. That's fine. Take your measurement and note it down. Subtract your upper bust from your full bust. If the number you get differs from the measurement associated with each cup size, you may need to make an adjustment. For the 0 to 18 B cup, the difference is 2 inches. For the 14 to 30, it's 4. So over that number and you'll need a full bust adjustment. If you're under, you'll need a small. You can see here in this chart what measurements correspond to which sewing cup size. In the case of the B cup, which is the pattern I'm using, there will be a 2-inch difference between the upper and full bust. This is what the Augusta 0 to 18 is drafted for. If your measurement is under 2 inches, you'll need a small bust adjustment. If it's over, you'll be doing a full bust adjustment. For the 14 to 30, the magic number is 4 inches. If you're over, you'll need a full, under a small. For example, with a full bust of 40 inches and an upper bust of 36, you subtract 36 from 40 to get 4, which would require a full bust adjustment. Now that we've established what sort of adjustment we're going to make, we need to calculate the amount you're going to add or subtract from your pattern. Take your number, in our case 4, and subtract 2 inches from it to get the full amount of your bust adjustment. Subtracting the 2 inches comes from the fact that the pattern is drafted for a B cup, which is a 2-inch difference already. Since this amount is already drafted into the pattern, you're just adding the additional amount on top of what exists. You would then divide the full amount of the adjustment in half, so you would be doing a 1-inch adjustment on each side of the pattern. If you came up with a number that was less than 2 inches, you're still going to divide it in half. So say we had a 1-inch difference, we'll divide that by 2 to get 1/2. That's the amount you'll subtract when doing your small bust adjustment. I'll now walk you through a full bust adjustment using the 2 inches from our example math. Now, one thing to note again about the Augusta before we get started marking up our pattern piece is that it is symmetrical overall, but the neckline is not symmetrical. So if you were to fold it in half, the grain line is also center front. You can see it does match up here, and then the neckline is where it differs. So we are going to do the bust adjustment to just 1/2, and then we'll transfer that over to the other side. All right, starting at the apex of the dart, draw a line vertically down to the hemline, making sure to keep this line parallel to the grain line. So since the length and shorten lines are perpendicular to the grain line, you can just use that as a way to square it up. Draw a line down. Label this 1. From there, you're going to draw a line from the apex to the armscye. You'll want this line to measure approximately 1/3 of the armhole measurement starting at the underarm intersection. This is not a hard and fast rule. It's more of a general guideline that we found works. But if you have a point that works better for you, keep going with that. Label this 2. Now we're going to draw a line from the apex through the center of the dart. Label that 3. And we'll just need another line through the body of the garment. You can draw a line wherever you like. We're just going to use the waistline because it's already there and perpendicular to the grain line. So you'll label that number 4, and those are the lines you'll need to create your bust adjustment. The first thing we're going to do is slash through the hemline along line 1 up to the apex and pivot over to the underarm. We're going to cut 2, but not through this point. We want these 2 pieces to be hinged. This is a little awkward while I'm filming. So here you can see the 2 pieces are still hinged. Now we're going to cut along line 3 from the side seam to the apex. Again, 2, but not through the point. We also want these 2 pieces hinged. All right, so here you can see all these pieces are hinged. Now we're going to open this area here, the amount of our bust adjustment. So since we're doing 1 inch, I'm going to mark out 1 inch and then simply align the outer panel along that line. You can see what this has done is create more space within the dart, allowing for a larger cup size. You'll notice that when you move the side panel out, it becomes longer than the main piece. So we'll need to cut along line 4 on the main piece and lower that to match our new piece here. Right. Just move that out of the way briefly and extend line 4. And then I also am going to extend the grain line so I can make sure it's perfectly lined up. Align your pattern piece so it is still on grain. And here you can see the bottoms now match. At this point, I now want to trace off what I'm working with. Make sure you transfer all your notches and pattern markings. And I'm also going to trace off the entire neck over to the other armhole. You can see I just have a little bit of the armhole and the whole neck. And that way, when I fold it over, I have the whole neck traced and I don't have to worry about it being asymmetrical. Now we can remove the original pattern piece. And you can see what we have here. So, we now need to complete the pattern. So I want to draw in the dart legs. This is a little light here. And we'll need to finish across the bottom. We have the grain line from when we drew it in previously, so we'll just extend that up. And then you'll want to refold your dart just to make sure we get the right dart take-up shape. So to do this, I score the bottom leg. Find the center. Score that. And then fold the bottom up. Paper does not like to fold. There we go. And then as we did when we were blending, we'll just trace across. And then remark the take up. Now there's quite a bit of dart take up in here. This whole shaded area is going to flip to the bottom and it's just kind of bulky. So one thing you can do is from the dart leg, trace off a 1/2 inch seam allowance into the dart. And you can remove all of this. This is just extra fabric, you don't need it. So then when you sew the dart, you'll fold it as normal. And this will be your stitching line. And this will be your cut edge. So you can just finish that with a serger. And then you only have this 1/2 inch underneath instead of all this fabric. Now in order to transfer this over to the other side, what we'll do is we'll cut it out. I'm going to cut out this extra dart take up so you can see what it looks like. Now to complete the other side of the pattern, all we have to do is fold along the grain line. All right, so you can see the shoulder here matches. So all we have to do is trace off our pattern piece. And then again, transfer over your bust point and your match point at the corner. You can draw in your dart legs. All right, and that is it. You now have a front piece with a bust adjustment. I'm going to walk you through a small bust adjustment first, and then I'll talk to you about what to do with the back of the pattern. Now, for the small bust adjustment, you're going to draw the same lines, 1, 2, 3, and 4 that you did for the full bust adjustment. The difference starts here. Instead of bringing the pattern out, we need to remove space, so we're going to bring it in. So the number in our example was a 1/2 inch. So what we'll do is we'll bring the pattern in a 1/2 inch. So this side panel will align with the 1/2 inch line we just drew. Just going to put a few pieces of tape here to keep things in place. You can see our dart's a little funky right now. We'll take care of that in a minute. Unlike the full bust adjustment where the side panel got longer, since we're bringing it in, the side panel is getting shorter. So you can either shorten this, or what I like to do is just lengthen the side panel. So again, we'll just cut along that line. Tape that together, and you'll have a little bit of space you need to fill in here. So for the dart, since we're not adding anything, you can tape this shut. And the new dart take up will fall right here. So you can trim off the points that overlap or that extend beyond. And that'll be your new dart take up. Again, you're going to trace this off onto the piece of paper, fold it over to mirror it to the other side, and you'll be all set. Now, the amount that we lengthened here on the front, you're going to want to measure that, and then you'll just spread the back along the lengthen or shorten line, the amount that you lengthened on the front. That way you can ensure that the side seams line up. So that's it for today's lesson. I hope this information helps you make a more informed decision on choosing a size and clarifies some of the most common pattern adjustments. Our next video will show you how to move your darts, raise the V-neck, and do a bicep adjustment. So stay tuned for that. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments below and I'll do my best to help out. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our latest posts, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye.